I'm just going to jump right in, illustrate 5 of the 7 challenges that we usually see in organizations that want to transform from project to product. And if you're wondering during the talk why I'm talking a lot about the problem, because I will be talking a lot about the problem in the next like 18, 90 minutes or so, it's because of Albert Einstein, obviously. So he famously said, if I had an hour to solve a problem, I will spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem. And that's exactly what we're going to do today. So the first story is kind of the beginning of it. And this is honestly something that we discovered a couple of years back, especially when we were working in B2B contexts with SaaS companies. And but it also worked for different companies, no worries. So you will see that in a minute. And there's this one thing in product, and I personally have an engineering background. I think engineers have that even stronger. It's kind of the tendency when you build something that at some point you kind of feel like this is your baby. So you spend, although you should fall in love with the problem a lot, at some point you got to fall in love with your solution, with your product. And a couple of years back, I actually was working in a team as a product manager, and I said this phrase like again and again and again, it's our baby, we have to take care of it. So much actually that like when we launched it, my team gave me like a baseball and it said, it's our baby on it, along with some other quotes. So that's just how much we fell in love with that product. And let's keep that metaphor for a minute, right? So let's say you're building a shiny new product, and fairly often, especially in B2B context, it kind of starts off as a project, because that's how products are born more often than not. So maybe you have your first customer already lined up for that product, and you build it like tailored towards that one customer. And then once you release it, it's out in the open, and it's this beautiful baby. It's just beautiful. Everything works as planned. It's just fantastic, right? And now the metaphor gets a little tricky, but now at some point, someone in the company thinks, all right, we might sell this baby again. You see, okay, it's a bit, but bear with me for a minute. And then someone has that idea. If we resell it, we find a customer, but maybe they want something different, like a third eye. And you look at the baby and you think, well, it's not really ideal. Maybe you talk to engineering and they say, yeah, well, we have done 2 eyes, we can do a third one. It's not pretty, but it's fine, right? And then the third customer comes along, love the baby, don't need the third eye, but maybe a third arm. And you're like, oh, that's even worse, but it's fine, we can resell it. It's like 95% the same. And then the fourth customer comes along, and you kind of probably can see where I'm going with this already. Say, love the baby, arm is also perfect, like the third one, but just on the other side. And that wouldn't be an issue if that was projects, separate code bases, right? But it's the same code base. So then the baby looks like that. And when you do it again and again and again, the baby will ultimately look a bit like that. And if that is not creepy enough yet, thankfully we have Gen AI to help us here. Well, that's not good. And that's not a product. That's projects. So you're basically doing a project, and it's even worse because you are doing projects on top of a product, right? And if you want like the kind of charty version of it, that is something that we call project stacking. So basically you have an idea, you start out, then you do the first project with a customer, then you do more and more and more, and you try to grow via these projects into like a scalable product, because that's kind of the goal here, right? And then at some point, maybe people in the company start to complain, we don't really have a roadmap, but we have all these project plans and deadlines. And then the engineers will start complaining at some point because they get buried in technical debt. And then at some point, it just explodes in your face. Might not happen with the 7th project, it might happen later, it might happen earlier, but that almost always happens. And this is actually what a CEO of a company that we worked with told us. Like they 10 people than now with 100. That's essentially how it feels like. And the underlying challenge, or one of the underlying challenges here, and that might be a bit weird to you, is first and foremost segmentation. and a wrong or like no segmentation at all. Because when you, especially in that B2B context where you have like not as many customers, you are doing sales a little more opportunistic, maybe you just want to kind of push it into the market, and then you are selling to these different segments way too early, and then that gives you a big variance in requirements, and then you have these exceptions in the code everywhere, and then basically that increases the maintenance effort, and then at some point you end up with the situation that I just described, that you don't really have any capacity to build anything proper for your customers anymore, because you're just like down in bugs and maintenance and all these kind of weird things, right? And the second thing is pricing. And that is also a thing that happens more often than not when a customer approaches you with like the third arm or I thing, right? Companies tend to price that a bit like projects. So time and material, and then when they think they're smart, they're adding a bit of a margin and a buffer on top. That's usually like 30, 40%. But in practice, that actually ends up being 200, 300, 400%, because they don't account for the maintenance, because that thing is still in your code. Even with the 10th or 15th or 20th customer, you still have to take care of that weird integration that you wrote to that weird, I don't know, SAP random version 10 years old, right? And if you price these features for customers just or single customer like project work, that also leads usually, if you are further along the road, that this effort that you have implementing it, increase it also already during development. And then what happens fairly often, and personally I have an engineering background, so I can tell you, like, sometimes we did things in the code that I'd rather not talk about, right? Just to like get it out and forget. And that increases the maintenance effort, obviously, at some point, right? And then you again end up with no actual capacity to build anything into your product that provides any value to your customers at all. And in case, so because I said we saw that a lot in B2B, to be honest, we started to see that a lot in other areas as well. If you are thinking internal products, corporates, or B2C environments, if you switch out pricing with budgeting and customer with stakeholder, then you're fine. And if you just do that in your head, then you will be fine through the rest of the talk. All right, second story. The customer is king or queen. So here's the weird thing. Project companies are actually more customer-centric than product companies. They are. They are just very customer-centric towards one customer, not to like a whole segment or customer group. And that becomes a problem at some point. Because if you have like these different customers and they all, or kings and queens, and they have all kind of these very differently looking castles, and then they approach you and go something like maybe the king, he wants like a tower into his castle or product. The queen wants like a castle ditch, and then you have another king queen that wants a gate, right? So how this usually happens then, they approach sales, right? And then sales is like, yeah, I'm gonna kind of prioritize that by biggest company account, I don't know, right? So it's somehow prioritized. And then that lands in big quotations in product. And I say that in big quotations, we'll see it in a minute, because they're not really doing product, because they just take it, they translate the requirements and chuck it down to UX and engineering, and they just go like, yeah, we're gonna build this. Fine. Then this happens. So there was something in the contract more. Oh, I'm not in a oh, I'm sorry. Good. Then something happens that was unforeseen. It was not unforeseen, but there was like a clause in the contract. They have to actually ship this by next month. And so everybody is running around. It's like, oh shit, we got to reprioritize this, right? So like, and then they obviously do. So it's like that we have to reprioritize it, because otherwise we're gonna pay like a buttload of money because we have to ship this next month. And then product is like, yeah, okay, then we just put this up. And then design and engineering, they're just sitting there, it's like, because I mean, like the product managers, they can go home. The engineers have to stay and build it, right? So I mean, they are like, for good reason, they are upset. And that is not product management. That is, I would even argue that is bad project management, to be honest, right? But firefighting. So we are firefighters in that scenario. That's what we at least want to get out of. Most people enjoy it. So I mean, let's look at this from like a more product focused way, right? So how this should actually work, and you're all aware of that, you all know this, it's just really hard to implement, is that when this kind of ideally product management would talk not only one couple of customers and they identify secure castle and they solution the streams the customer in it or something, right? And then that process is reversed. So sales and say, hey, I think we can sell that, and they're like, yeah, ideally, very oversimplified, I get that, but that's how it should ideally. So how do you solve this? So the bad thing is that as an individual, it's really, really, really hard to solve this. But as an organization, you can solve this. It's also hard, but you can if you want. And the first step is awareness. And that's also the reason why I talked so much about the problem. So we haven't talked about the solution yet. So 15 minutes in, no solution there. And the reason is that it's really important that you kind of get in a state, organizational state of awareness here. So people need to connect the dots, because you see all these little fires everywhere, right and left, and people hardly make the connection because these things, so we talked about this, we haven't talked about platform strategy and push versus pull. These things live in different parts of the organization. Obviously, the CEO or business unit lead, if you are in a bigger corporate, they are responsible for it. But the thing is, you have all kinds of different functions, like chief sales officer, CMO, CPO, CTO, that own part of the story. And so they all need to work together in order to solve this. And that makes it a very, very hard problem to solve. And typically, how we start solving it. So I'm not going to give you a blueprint, because every organization is in fact different, but like maybe some kind of idea how you can approach that. So I think the top-down challenge here is, and this is like a real example that I kind of blurred, is that you have to basically put all the deciders in a room and figure out like how work is flowing through the company at the moment, and then see where it kind of breaks. And then they are responsible to align on that, and basically also get to a state where the company is aware and aligned. And the bottom-up change, and that's also important, because from a product perspective, we are not off the hook. The thing is that the product teams really have to take serious responsibility for product. And that means all the things that we talked about, including prioritization, road mapping, and ultimately for the product success. And the thing is, other departments need to accept that, but they also need to hold us accountable for it. So it's not only a responsibility, but we are also to be made accountable by others if it doesn't work. And actually, I've brought like a small video. I think it's 2 minutes. Do we have that time? Good. So my partner Thomas, he spoke with Marty Kagan, I think beginning of the year when his book was released, about what you can actually do if you're an individual contributor in the product space, in order to make sure that you acquire the right skills to navigate that change.
So now we talked a lot about, a product leader, what he or she can do to influence the company. Let's make the challenge a little bit harder. Say you're a product manager, or, you just started off as a product owner or something like that, right? What would you tell them how they can influence, or can they influence the organization?
Yeah, well, this is the most common, really. I probably share this advice more than really anything else I can think of. Somebody is, let's say, your audience is primarily in Europe, and unfortunately, product owners are very prevalent there. And I tell product owners that I'm very nervous for your job. I don't think it's a real job. I think what you want to do to protect yourself is up-level your skills to a product manager. And I have never seen a company where any manager or any leader prevents somebody from up-leveling their skills. They, they might not pay for it, they might not understand it, but if somebody goes to the effort of raising their skills from a product owner to a product manager, at the least, they'll be appreciated. In my experience, those are people that, okay, all of a sudden there's somebody who really understands our customers. There's somebody who really understands the data. There's somebody who actually understands the business. We should promote that person because that's who the stakeholders want to work with. At the very least, they'll probably get a promotion.
So Marty Kagan. So we are actually writing a book about this at the moment. And if you like what you saw today, I would super appreciate feedback. So we are writing this in the open, so you can simply scan the QR code, get access to it, leave us comments and ideas, maybe also like personal stories. That would really help to understand how your realities look like. Because I mean, we have talked to about, I would say, 200 product managers and product leaders in the last 1.5 years about this topic, and there are similarities, and there are definitely like the challenges are very, like, they are kind of universal here, but yeah, this would help a lot. And probably you can also share the slides, right? And also, if you ever feel like coming to Munich, so we are actually hosting the Just Product conference in October with people like Bob Muesta, who I really love. He basically invented, together with Clayton Christensen, Jobs to be Done, David Pereira, Nimisha from Uber. So very, very cool people are speaking there. So we also have like a voucher for you in Cologne, and would love us to join. And yeah, this little bit at the bottom, I told you in the beginning, I'm not gonna tell you what I'm doing until I've given you some value. So we are actually running cohort-based trainings for product people, which is mostly about for 8 weeks working along the product development life cycle on your own product, meeting other product people, exchange ideas, and just yeah, get better at what we do every day. So thank you very much for listening, and thank you again for inviting me.